Well, we are here to present the results of the annual AMEC survey, and Mr. Philip Lynch will touch upon the highlights, and then we'll try to translate what these results mean for each region and for the companies run by our panelists here. Thank you so much. Phil, stage is yours.
Thanks, Rayna. Right, good morning. Thanks again for coming early. When I first saw 7:30, I thought this is a misprint, surely, but no, it's not. It's 7:30. But welcome to the first session, this exclusive group, first session of the 2017 summit. I don't know how many of you have seen the results of the Business Insights survey before. It's a bit of a telephone directory of slides and charts and figures. So what I've tried to do is distill it down to some of the key trends in the business of evaluation. Most people here are analysts, but you're also business people, you run businesses. So I'm looking at it very much from a business viewpoint. The survey itself, 107 organisations could take part. There was a very high completion rate, so we had a completion rate of about 80%, which was great. As Barry said, the results were just released yesterday, so this really is a snapshot of the industry as it is as of today. It was completed by people who know their businesses. You're talking MD, CEO level. So it really is, I think, a very true representation of where we are as a sector. If we look at the breakdown by business size, this is the first time we've had this because one of the bugbears of the survey has always been companies that are restricted by Sarbanes-Oxley from declaring any sort of financial information. So what Russell, the lead researcher, cleverly did this year was introduce bandings. Can you at least say approximately which of these financial bands your business falls into? So as you can see, we've got 17% are north of 5 million annual revenue from media evaluation. The bulk of the membership are mid-sized companies, 1 to 5 million, and then smaller companies up to 500,000 annual revenues. So that's the complexion of our business sector. If we look at it in an international viewpoint, this question has changed. You're not looking at the geographic base of organisations, you're looking at where people do business. So if 10% or more of your revenues come from any of these regions, you are in these pots. So as we can see, the two big standouts are North America and Western Europe. So AMEC as an organisation is still primarily European and North American focused, but I think that's changing, and we're beginning to see more growth, more membership, and members doing business globally across different markets. As I said, I want to look at two things really, how the industry is growing and how the members of AMEC are leveraging and exploiting opportunities for growth. So this next chart looks at really our expectations for growth in the coming year. Okay, so what's going to happen over the next 12 months? And over 80% of members expect there to be growth. About a quarter of us think there's going to be significant growth. The majority think it will grow marginally, but it's still on an upward trajectory. Only 5% are expecting a contraction. These numbers are broadly compatible with expectations declared last year, but the big change is far more people are expecting significant growth. That's more than doubled. So I'd say as a sector, we're more bullish about our future prospects. That has implications for some of the risk factors that we will come on to. So if we're a growing business, what is underpinning that growth and how is the industry responding to growth opportunities? And the main thing that leapt out at me in this survey is the drive to innovation. As a sector, we are not standing still, and there has been a significant uplift in investment in innovative services and new solutions. You know, if we look at the results for 2017, the number or the proportion of members who think that, you know, investment will stay the same, has gone down from 24% to just 15%. Everyone else is going to be investing. And the question is, what are we investing in? So the big growth area really is insights and research. As a sector, we are upskilling, okay? We then have new automated measurement technologies. International services is low. I think that's because for many members, they've built out their international offers. So what they're looking to do now is add more consultative, insight, and research-led services to it. So we're looking to add value. We're looking to increase our skill sets. The priorities for future development, you know, we hear a lot about AI and automated technologies, and that's beginning to come through, that people are looking for new data capture and processing. As a sector, just as we are adding new skills in insight and research, we need help. We need technology to help with the heavy lifting, because as there becomes more media and more data comes, you know, into our purview, we need technology that's going to help us manage that data. So they are the major priorities for future development. Looking at risk factors, I've just touched on a couple of things here. One is fake news. Now, the Young Leaders Group are going to run a separate session on this. They've done their own survey on it. It's well worth everyone attending. If we think about the impact of fake news, because news, the media agenda, this is our currency. This is the raw material with which we work. If it loses credibility, if a client feels that the information that we are using is incorrect, then we do have a problem. If we, as an industry, don't pick this stuff up and it starts entering client organizations, potentially we have a liability. And I think as an industry, we do need to address that fact. So, you know, the majority of members believe that fake news is impacting the business to some extent. The other thing is industry consolidation. We've established that the business is growing. So if you are the owner of a business, the good news for you is there is someone out there that wants to buy your growth. And most members agree that this is going to happen. Now, the other thing around that is that because we've already had a big wave of consolidations, I think that the supply and demand curve is now working in the interests of you, of potential sellers. Remember, we looked at how AMEC is largely comprised of mid-sized businesses. Well, actually, the supply of mid-sized businesses available for sale is tightening. There are fewer opportunities for global players to bid for businesses. So I think as well as the demand to buy your growth is increasing, I think actually price tags are likely to increase as well. But what that does mean is that as the industry consolidates, as there is restructuring within the sector, it means some partnerships, some of the companies that you work with, the complexion will change. Thinking about AMEC for a moment, as I said, I wanted really to focus on the business aspects of the survey, but I think it's worth touching on the integrated evaluation framework. And as we can see, in terms of the uptake of the framework, across all members, we've got 40% are using it to some extent, 33% plan to use it in the future. So the majority are taking up the framework to some extent. And I think this is an important development because I remember being in Barcelona where we addressed the principles of measurement, whereas now what we're seeing is a migration towards the practice of measurement. And I think it is important, both for AMEC and for the sector and the credibility of the sector, that we actually implement those principles and use them. I mean, I touched on that point about fake news. As a sector, we need client confidence and credibility. And I think, having a framework does actually benefit us in the long term in the eyes of our clients. The last slide I've got to share with you today is on the future role of AMEC itself. What's good about AMEC? What is the value of AMEC? Why do we come to Bangkok? Why are we members of AMEC? And I think the cornerstone of AMEC's near-term future is to continue its work in educating the marketplace about measurement. I mean, the biggest benefit to all members is that AMEC is paving the way by raising awareness of measurement, raising the credibility of measurement with clients across the globe. And I know it's something that Barry is committed to, and across everything else that AMEC does, ranging from best practice guidelines, internal training schemes, it is the training of the PR and comms sector that I think is the critical element that AMEC brings to the party, because they can do it. They don't have a commercial interest. AMEC doesn't have a commercial interest. They don't speak in the same way as a company does. They are a true impartial, independent voice. And so when AMEC is, looking to leverage interest in evaluation, that really does serve to benefit all members. Anyway, that's it from me. I'm now going to hand back to Rayna, and hopefully we can now all have an early morning discussion about the findings. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. As Phil mentioned, we really want to have an open discussion, so please feel free to ask any questions to Carlos, Philip, Michael, and Francois. And as we've got here actually representatives of almost from all continents, let me start with Francois with my first question. Francois is coming from South Africa, as probably most of you know, and I believe that Africa is a region with really great potential for growth. So I was wondering, how do you see these results? How do they reflect your company and your region?
I think if I look at the results in total, it is very similar to the rest of the world. I think at the moment, particularly the markets where we operate in South Africa, Nigeria and Kenya, overall growth from an economic perspective for these countries are under pressure at the moment. There's lots of political upheaval. There's elections coming in Kenya. In South Africa, we've got major issues from the ruling party, and there's a lot of stress happening there, which puts overall negative impact on business activities. Our economy has grown by 0.3% for the last year. We've just been downgraded to junk status by two of the big ratings agencies, which is worrying. But I think for us as an industry, where the opportunity lies is because money is tight, because business activity is tight, people need to utilize their budgets much more effectively. And I think in there is the opportunity for us. People need to do better research. You can't just spend a lot of money on campaigns, which is not going to work at the end of the day. So even despite this tough economic conditions, there's a great opportunity for our industry, particularly in these markets.
Actually, can I Francois, how is sort of activity and investment in the comms sector generally in Africa? Because, and paid in advertising, particularly in CPG and automotive, there is huge investment in advertising to try and reach African consumers, and it is seen long term as a major growth opportunity. And so there's a lot of ad dollars going into Africa at the moment. What's happening in the comms sector?
I think from Ornico perspective, which makes us maybe a little bit more different than most AMEC members, we traditionally come from an advertising perspective, so we do still do a lot of research from an advertising perspective. So you're right, there's a huge investment from an advertising perspective. I think from a commerce perspective, there is investment, but I think because of the uncertainty, people aren't always willing to put a stake in the ground. I mean, I've seen it with some of the big banking brands. I mean, Barclays owned a few of our local banks, and they were increasing their exposure to it, and then they sold it off again. And I think a little bit of uncertainty from that perspective. So guys are hanging tight from a comms perspective, but I've definitely seen a growth in advertising spend. You're very correct in that perspective.
Carlos, Latin America was mentioned as a region where you invest a lot heavily in innovation. Mm-hmm. Is that true?
Well, I'm going to add something to what Francois said, if I can. What we see, we have an economic situation that's very similar to Africa. We're seeing an uptick right now. Brazil, which was a sinkhole for the past 3 years, is starting to improve, but still our region has a lot of political change going on and economical change, and that's not good for business, but it has been good for our business in the past years, especially last year. You see, we noticed the same as you have, that comms are not as good as advertisement or marketing to show conversion rates, especially in digital. So that's why you see a lot of investment in developing markets, because it's much easier to say to your home office, look, if we invest this amount, we'll get this conversion rate. If we do over that, that means we're doing a good job. If we do below, it's a bad job. For comms, it's much harder, and comms are much more traditional in our region. So when budget is tight, it's easier to cut their budget down. We've been doing a lot of investment, both us and other companies that are in AMEC in the region, mainly for two reasons. One, the first one is that we are trying to help comms show the value they have, and that has been a very good strategy in our part. It has worked very well for us. And the second reason is that there's very few agencies in Latin America who are AMEC members. And so by investing heavily, we still keep an edge over most of the market. So there's a bit of a skew in the, because since the how do you call it, the insights, the thing that we fill, the survey, thank you. Since the survey is only filled by AMEC members, which is great, we only see the picture from our perspective. But most of the agencies in Latin America are mom and pop agencies with two people who just simply cannot invest and will not invest, who do a very manual and non-standardized job. And so it's very important for us to invest heavily so that we can show an edge to our clients. Both us and I imagine the few other AMEC members who are in the region.
So I was wondering, do you invest more in skills like insights or consulting skills, or do you invest more in data scientists? Because those were the
well, we are investing
mentioned
very heavily on insight skills. For us, investing heavily in insight skills many times means either bringing people here or doing AMEC or working with our people in different specific skills related to insights. And we are also investing very heavily on AI. We have, for the past 4 years, been working with 2 different governments in developing AI that's centered around our cultural variations and that can be easily integrated into an insights platform.
I see, thank you. Michael, what does it stand out for you when you saw the slides of you?
I guess there's probably 3 points that stand out, and when we look at those slides and the findings that we've shown, I think when we look at growth, innovation and consolidations, and it was pleasing to see that the majority of members see growth, because if we don't see growth, we shouldn't be sitting here running our businesses, because we all should be thinking about increased billings. Innovation is very important. We have to innovate. If we're not innovating, we're falling behind. And certainly from our point of view at Mediaverse and Australian Associated Press, we're always thinking about innovation and how we can do things better. And I guess the final thing is the consolidation, which is good and bad from our point of view. And certainly down in the Asia Pacific area, we have a great growth story in Isentia, who have sort of come from a very small base to be a very well-respected and giant now in the Asia Pacific area. And it certainly is a great growth story from an Australian point of view to see a company like that take off out of very small beginnings in Australia and now be a major player with Decisions and the Kantars and the others that are competing in there. So just touching on that insight. So Mediaverse, we're part of Australian Associated Press, and we have probably about 700 or 800 staff, of which are around about 500 journalists. And I think it's important to point out that within our analysis division, we do not employ one journalist, because journalists don't have the skill set that we need as communicators and as analysts. So we bring a different skill set to what we do in the media intelligence market. To have 400 or 500 journalists to call on is great from our point of view, but our continual updating of our skill set, our continual updating of our knowledge centre means that we're not looking for journalism skills anymore, and I think we're seeing that in some of these survey results. We're looking for more well-rounded communications professionals. So it's that little bit of management consulting, that little bit of PR consulting, that little bit of journalism, that little bit of economic advice, all comes into what we do, I think, as media analysts. And I think that was shown in some of the results that we saw on the screen before.
Thank you, Michael. I think we're open for questions, so please feel free. We've got people with microphones around the room, and please state your name and the company you represent. Thank you. Richard, over there.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for a great presentation, and thank you for the report. I had the benefit of reading it early, and it's a really excellent report. My first question is, where is it available? So how can everybody in the room get hold of it to read in detail? My second question's around the move towards not having perhaps PR and communications as our primary market, but people talk about moving up the food chain to marketing. Did we see evidence of that? And what do the panel think that the benefits and drawbacks of us as an industry trying to focus more on the marketing sector as compared to the PR and comms sector might be? And I'm Richard Bagnall.
Thank you for the questions, Richard. The survey was distributed yesterday, so it would have been emailed direct to the nominated AMEC representative within your organisation. The email, I believe, came from Russell. And so you should have had those yesterday. That's the main survey, plus a drill down on your own particular company's performance within the overall survey. Subsequently, it will be available, I believe, via the AMEC website. And of course, if in any doubt, all roads lead back to Barry, and I'm sure he will be able to point you in the right direction. There was a question about, which disciplines are we working with? And so there is some data in there specifically on how AMEC members are working with marketing departments. So there is some information about that in the survey. Specific to Richard's point, as we move up the food chain, once we hit marketing, then there's a whole new world of competition that comes in, which is a very mature marketing analytics sector. Now, traditionally, whilst we've remained with PR and comms, we haven't really, butted heads with marketing analytics. The important point to make is that as we start competing with marketing analytics firms, we are not going to be competing with a company that has found, with a sector that has found all the answers. I don't know how many of you are familiar with what happened at the start of this year. I'm going to stand up. Mark Pritchard of P&G, he issued an appeal to the marketing analytics industry to put its house in order and to start, providing more accurate models for attribution as to what happens to marketing dollars. So if you read Advertising Age in January of this year, you would have seen headlines such as crisis in marketing, because no one's really got it right in terms of attribution and analysis of marketing outcomes. So I don't think that AMEC members entering this sector have a magic bullet that's going to solve these problems. But at the same time, I don't think we will be pushing against a closed door. And maybe from our experiences where we've spent a long time thinking about and trying to prove the value of communications. So if we start using our brain power and our innovative spirit to start addressing questions of marketing attribution, then we could make some headway. And I think clients, marketing insight directors in client organizations will be open to looking at things in a slightly different way. Because as I say, they do not have an answer at the moment.
Can I add something, Philip?
Yeah.
If you look at the survey, about 56% of AMEC companies last year responded that they had marketing clients. It's 70% this year. So it's almost a 18% increase year over year. And what's more interesting is that last year, about 4% of AMEC members responded that they had sales as part of their clients. And this year is 10%. It's more than double. So we do see growth. We do clearly see growth up the food chain. But we also see growth, that the expected growth is on the comms part. So we are slowly growing up the food chain, but most of us think that most of the growth that will come from the comms part.
And I agree with Carlos on that point. I think we've still got plenty of room to move within our mainstream marketing communications or our mainstream PR industry. And I think we need to move more from our low-level public relations clients up to our higher levels, and I hate using the word C-suite clients, but offering more of that insights. We are about insights now. Metrics is only a small part of what we all do. It's all about offering that little bit of knowledge that the C-suite doesn't have. And I think we've got a long way to go within our mainstream communications clients before we are fully accepted at that higher level. And with full acceptance comes a lot more money because we can charge a lot more for our reports. And that's what we're all about in the end, is making our firms more financial. So certainly I think in our Asia Pacific area, and we do lag a little bit from Europe and from other areas, and whether it's a distance thing or the cultural thing, I'm not sure. But I think we have a long way to go before we are fully accepted by the C-suite and being able to charge the same as management consultants charge. And the same as top-level PR people charge. I think we have to put ourselves up there offering insights so our value add is a lot more accepted and more financial fulfilling for us.
Yeah, an important thing we see when we go to C-suites, and we're even worse than you guys, so we're in Asia Pacific, is it's not about being accepted, it's mostly about being acknowledged. Yeah. They don't even know we exist. What we do exists. So we still have a long way to reach the C-suite, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's about engagement, and it's about telling people what we do and how it will benefit them in the end.
Yeah, Michael mentioned management consultants. So that has been probably the story of marketing analytics for the past year, which is McKinsey's doing it, PwC are doing it, Deloitte's are doing it. And if you talk to the marketing analytics guys, whether it's at Kantar or Havas, then the challenge from from management consultants entering that space is very real to them. So just as we're coming up, I mean, I'm not going to style it that we're coming up and management consultants is coming down, but we're coming across and they're coming across too. So it's going to become more of a crowded space. The other thing I would add is that I think us as a sector moving into marketing analytics and paid analytics is inevitable because of what's going on in social, particularly with Facebook, but other networks as well, which is over the past 2 years, there has been doubts raised about organic models for organic reach across social platforms, and that so much of it now is being driven by paid activity, which means that's where we're going to be. That is what we will be measuring. paid for content, paid for engagement in some form will become more of what we do, as we move on. And once you start, your measure, suddenly your Facebook analysis is less about, likes, shares, influencer groups, and more about paid connectivity, then that really does put you on that upward trajectory where you are going to be doing more and more and more of that.
Yeah.
Because then, as soon as you are doing, measurement across paid strategies in social, then the client's going to say, and how is that knitting together as part of our, our cross-platform advertising strategy? So I see it as inevitable, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can agree with you there, I think what happens from a comms and a marketing and even an advertising industry perspective. I remember a few years back our topic for the conference was breaking down the silos. And I think we still have some way to break down those silos, but we as whatever industry we're operating in forget the audience of the communication, of the advertising. I mean, the audience member does not sit there and think, this was a nice paid-for campaign for this specific audience. He just gets a message. He doesn't care if it's paid, if it's earned, or what it is. And I think that's why it's inevitable. It's going to happen, not just for social, but for TV, radio, any kind of paid-for advertising. It's inevitable.
Petra, over there.
Sorry. Hi. I was wondering, as we are talking about a global change and a general change within the industry, like, the heads of comms are changing, the industry is changing, technologies are changing, data sets are changing. How do you think, all of you, our industry should change? Like, what is it the companies should change within their organizations? How the behavior should be different? Because it's obvious that we are going through a very disrupted age where things are just getting faster. They are getting more global. We don't, the marketing and communication is integrating step by step all together. So what is the change we have to go through? I think the traditional media intelligence companies are going through a very, let's say, challenging times to change. What is it we have to change? Thank you.
Petra, let me just give you one nugget of information, I guess, where I see change coming from. And I'm a dinosaur when it comes to social media. And I'm a dinosaur when it comes to everything social. So my job is to employ people who are a lot smarter than me that know social a lot better than I do. I'm still astounded by every time we're walking into clients, it's social, social, social. So let's take that back 5 years when we were walking in. It was probably more about metrics and mainstream measurement. And then we moved across more into the insights. But I think there's not one client that we have that doesn't require some kind of social analysis. And I think where you're asking about where the change is coming from, I think social, and we didn't really see that, Phil, in some of those slides that we saw, or the responses to the survey. But what I'm seeing in Asia Pacific is social is becoming more mainstream. And we were talking earlier about paid and earned across Facebook. They're going to be the concepts that we have to grapple with. And with the demise of normal and mainstream newspapers, and certainly in Australia, where we're going through a period of change where newspapers are consolidating, the clients are all about social first and legacy media second. And so we need, I think, certainly within Mediaverse, all of our people are a lot smarter on social. They get social, they live and breathe social, and they're talking social. So that's just one area that I think where we need to change to keep up with what's happening in the industry worldwide.
Can I add? Maybe it's, well, all regions are very different, but I feel like social is already here. It's not somewhere where we should change, or at least we're on track. What I feel, where I feel we're not, or we need to change is how we present ourselves and how we sell our industry. I see our industry has a major image problem. Perhaps it's in my region, because I'm not aware in other regions, but I do see a major image problem when we go to clients, how we sell our services, and even through the penetration of standards in the industry. Because even though we all agree on them, many times we still fidget things, and there's no one there saying, no, wait, standards should be respected, or we're not respecting standards. Everyone does kind of their own thing. It's all good. Everyone sells themselves as, mom and pop store where you go, you pick what you want, and that's it. And I do feel that the clients don't value our services the way they should, and we're not providing them with the true value we should be providing them. So that's where I feel we should change, at least in the developing markets like ours.
Yeah, I think if you look at challenges which faces us as an industry. I also sit in South Africa on the IAB's Measurement Council, and they're very concerned about Facebook, who now wants to serve news. So if you click on a news link being published in Facebook, it's actually not going to leave Facebook sites. Yeah. They're going to serve the actual story in Facebook for you, which is obviously from an advertising perspective, you don't know if those ads are getting served to the audience or not, which was paid for on the specific media channel, which makes it very powerful. And I mean, they keep their data very close. Now, I mean, they are so huge that it's enormously powerful data, but it's not independent. So I think there's a big issue that we also need to look at, because at the end of the day, Facebook will be able to tell you as an advertiser or as a brand, whatever they want, and you're not going to be able to dispute that.
The thing there, Francois, is that there's a lot of data on Facebook, but by their own admission, it's wrong. So, Facebook was forced to pull back on its marketing reach metrics in September and again in December, and they're now undergoing a year of impartial external review in a bid to regain credibility. Yeah. And I mean, that's what sparked Mark Pritchard and P&G's bombast against marketing analytics. So, again, I think there's an opportunity there. In answer to Petra's question, I think that this industry has some smart people and smart business owners in it, and you can see from what the data on the investment and innovation priorities, twofold: the upskilling in terms of insight, but also upscaling in terms of the use of automation to handle increasingly big and growing content and data sets. So I think the industry gets what the challenge is. It's both that, delivering scale, but also adding value through sophistication. So scale and sophistication. These are the twin pillars of, the future activity within our sector.
Hi, I just want to not quite take exception, but taking things back a little bit to the comment that as an industry we're starting to move up the food chain towards marketing. As a 25-year communications and PR professional, I'm not sure the direction's right there. But it does sort of raise a question for me. I see a bit of a fork in the road in our space. One going down that marketing and measuring the consumer relationship and the consumer interaction route, and the other down the issues and reputation management side, which is more the risks and issues side. And it feels like a lot of the development at AMEC and in the industry, including the evaluation framework, is focused on that measuring a campaign towards an audience or consumers, etc. And there's not a lot, it's hard to apply what's there to something like an ongoing reputation measurement piece or ongoing risk and issues identification and management. What are your thoughts on whether we also need to be looking at that side of things?
Actually, I think you make a very good point. Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Ruben.
Ruben. Hi, Ruben. I think you make a very good point, is that we look at PR and comms as this edifice of clients, but actually within PR and comms, it breaks down, and if you sit down with, someone from that sector, a practitioner, they will happily explain to you the difference between media relations, reputation management, and you're right, it needs different measurement approaches and analytical approaches to deal with each of those. So, and certainly things such as organisational reputation are not something that you're going to be able to solve with marketing metrics. So, and that to the point, I think that Michael said, that there is still plenty of room and opportunity for growth around reputation, media relations, and other the sectors that we've been involved with traditionally. The whole marketing thing is really on top of that. And I think it's so. Yep, there's a fork in the road, and some smaller companies may decide that they need to remain focused on that particular area, and I guess it will be determined by the relationship you have with your client and what your client's doing. If they are pursuing a more integrated approach, then it is likely that the work you do for them will become more integrated across both earned and social and paid. If the client is happy or believes that they need to keep their reputation management separate from whatever they're doing in marketing, then I think the reporting and the approach will remain focused on a specific area. Anyone to add?
Well, you're preaching to the converted, Ruben, so we could spend a lot of time on the evaluation framework and talk about its merits and its advantages and disadvantages. And what you're saying is 100% correct. The evaluation framework doesn't work for everything. And reputation, and as Philip said, media relations has its own requirements and its own way of doing things. So, as you mentioned, fork in the road, maybe. It's a horses for courses that we face. We're not saying, and I don't think the insights is coming through and saying that we should be using the framework for every single case study or every client that we're working on, because all clients are different and all needs are different. So it's a horses for courses framework in a way, and we take the best bits out and we leave other bits, put other bits in to deliver what the client wants in the end.
So if I may add something, I think actually that our strongest point as an industry is that we're so flexible that we've already left, let's say, the traditional methodology which we would apply to each client case. We go to the client and we speak to the client, and then we build the methodology around this client case. So I think this is our competitive advantage actually, that we can address any measurement issue in this way, and this is actually what we were aiming with the integrated framework, that it gives an approach, a structure. I mean, this is its main objective, to give a structure, not to evaluate one campaign or one project, but just to give really an approach to any of what you've mentioned.
Yeah, it's to have a unified idea, but actually I'm sure there's room for different types of frameworks that are better suited for different types of comms. So that's what we're here for anyways.
I think we have time for one more question, one or two. Nobody? Okay, then I have a question. We talked about growth, we talked about challenges, and I was wondering, how do you see the role of AMEC in your regions in terms of what's the thing which you think AMEC should do more? Is it the education? Is it really giving the structure like via tools like the framework? Or is it something else which is not mentioned here?
I think definitely from our perspective, the education aspect is huge. Particularly from an international perspective. I mean, for us, our association of AMEC gives us a lot of extra clout, which certainly helps to open doors. But the education angle is also a very nice take. or angle to take to open doors for yourself, because it's not a hard sell, to clients, because you're sharing a lot of knowledge and best practices and case studies with clients or potential clients. So it's not as much such a huge selling opportunity or a hard sell opportunity, but a much nicer soft approach. So I think the education aspect, particularly for us, remains a huge advantage.
Yeah, I think two of the things that came out in the survey when respondents were asked about this was that the two big things were education and the AMEC networking and conference facility. And touching on what Francois said, education, yep, very important. We send our guys that need it through the AMEC college to do the courses. From our point of view, we find conferences like this to be very valuable. It's okay for you guys in Europe who can drive an hour and meet other people very quickly, but when you're at the bottom end of the world...
Europe's just such a small little thing, isn't it?
It is.
It's like 3 hours.
And you're there in France and Germany, but for us it's a plane trip to meet anyone else within our industry on this part of the world, and we certainly get a lot out of these networking and conferences that we have at AMEC, and it was pleasing to see, I think, in the results that a large portion of people found the AMEC conference worthwhile, fulfilling, and more importantly sustainable, because we need these to grow to keep the industry growing the way it is.
Yeah, I agree completely, actually, with the characterization, especially you did, Francois. It gives us a lot of clout, especially in our region. For example, last year for AMEC, for Measurement Month, we did 8 events in 8 different countries. And they are a great way for clients to understand that there are standards behind us, there is a science behind us, and they help us do outreach. So for me, education and outreach to the whole comms community is where AMEC helps us the most and can help us the most.
Yeah, I think it's two simple objectives really, and that's raising awareness and credibility of the sector. I hope for a day where when we walk into a new prospective client's office, the first thing we don't have to do is explain what we do, because they already get it. And there are successes, largely through the outreach of AMEC and the work of Alex Aitken in the UK. The UK government's approach to comms and measurement has been transformed. So building advocates, evangelists within both public and private sector organisations, I think, is key. We think, how do we raise awareness and credibility of what we do with client organisations worldwide? And suddenly that looks like a huge task. But if you break it down, we are in fact dealing with a particular level, a particular contact group within these organisations. So you start to personalise the objective. We know the people within client organisations that we need to reach. And once it's explained what the value, what the benefits of what we do is, we can start to build advocacy networks across public bodies, across industry sectors. And AMEC really is the heart of that, because it is an impartial champion of everyone's efforts. So that's what makes AMEC important.
Yeah, I completely agree. Actually, I can tell you from my perspective, Central Eastern Europe, education is so important. So when we speak to all of you guys here and we see that you face the same issues as we do, it's like you don't feel alone in this battle. Thank you. Last question, please.
Hello, my name is Asha from Icentia. I'm curious to unpack a bit more about the innovation response. And for everyone in each of your markets, how much is AI and machine learning a threat or an opportunity to our industry?
We've been investing quite heavily in AI, topic modeling, working with academics. So I think, we're not going to have a choice. The masses of data that we're collecting, particularly from a social perspective. I mean, some of our banking clients get in excess of 200,000-300,000 mentions a month on social media. So if you want to try and use human analysts on that, it becomes a serious challenge. So I think, I mean, there's a lot of work that still needs to happen from that perspective. I mean, we know, you know, even from a sentiment perspective, how inaccurate automated sentiment is. So there's a lot of work that still needs to happen, but I don't think we have a choice. It's you know, the amount of volumes and the conversations are just getting so much. We need to invest in it.
Yeah, when we talk about AI, we fail to discern or separate in the different types of things we can do with AI. Because one thing is sentiment, in which I think we're all very well versed, but there are other ways AI could help us and we're not using it. I see more of an opportunity. I feel that our sector is not using well all of the different types of AI for data analytics, for big data analytics especially. We're not finding insights. We're using people just to find insights when we could be using AI at least to guide our people more and more. And we're all heavily invested into sentiment analysis because it gives us an edge on the first part of the whole productive process, but we're not looking at how we could be improving other parts as much. And I feel that there is a lot of growth opportunity in big data analytics focused on our sector, and there is a lot of scientific knowledge already available that we should be applying more and more for that.
Yeah, look, I think I tend to split it into two. I think we've got our social and we've got our traditional. And when we're talking about AI, I don't want to hear about automated sentiment. It just doesn't work. And I don't want to present automated sentiment to our clients. And I understand that we're dealing with big data sets, but I think AI can help us in other ways, not necessarily with our automated sentiment. And when we talk about innovation, I think we're talking about innovation in the way that we go about doing things. So you've got two types of innovation. It's your technical innovation and it's your mainstream innovation in just getting better at the way that we analyse and the way that we deliver the results to our clients. And that may not cost a lot of money. It may be more staff training, it may be more in-house training and getting a better grip on what clients want. We've been through this whole idea of the dashboards, and I think we've moved on from the dashboards. We've been through where we started, Phil, sending out PDF reports and PowerPoint reports and moving on to the dashboards, and now we've got to move on to the next level. Where that next level is, I'm not quite sure, and that's where our innovation comes in. We're always thinking, what is it that the client wants? How can we present things very differently so the client sees value in those? And that's where I think our innovation will come from Mediaverse and from AAP, and we'll leave the AI to the larger organisations like yours actually to sort out for us, and then we'll follow suit with that a little later.
Well, just to illustrate what you're saying, and AI could perfectly be applied to identify, because you're talking about the client side, the delivery, how you deliver your services, and how we can innovate there, which is true. We've been innovating slowly in the past years after we went after the dashboards, in the post-dashboard era, but AI can be used. Major companies use it in other sectors to identify how we should deliver. So we are failing there and using technology to better improve our delivery network.
Yeah. AI won't deliver you the insights that clients want, that high-level execs want. And so I guess we can talk about the semantics of what the reports are. AI can certainly help, I think, at a lower level, but at the upper level where we want to be, I can't see AI playing a major role in
No, I don't mean AI used to deliver. I mean AI helping you generate insights about not for the client, about your own clients and how they want to be to receive their service. It can be used.
Yep.
And that's somewhere we're not using.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great end of our discussion.
Okay.
So I'm sure that our panelists will be available for questions now in the breaks and during these 2 days of conference. Thank you very much for joining us and have a great conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.